Good evening and welcome to Educational Innovations 360 Degrees live chat. I am your host, David Johnson of Transform Ed Consulting. And let me begin by thanking Cassandra Williams. Educational Innovation 360 Degrees is Cassandra's brainchild. Cassandra is an educational influencer and the CEO of Educational Innovations 360 Degrees. Educational Innovations 360 Degrees is dedicated to improving reading performance of students through one-to-one improved training of teachers. Our guest tonight would be Dr. Mordecai Ian Brownlee. Effective July 15, 2021, Dr. Mordecai Ian Brownlee will serve as the 5th president of the Community College of Aurora, Colorado, with campuses in Aurora and Denver. CCA is a Hispanic-serving institution providing instruction to over 12,000 students throughout its 350 square mile service area. Dr. Brownlee currently serves as the Vice President for Student Success at St. Philip's College, San Antonio, Texas, the only college in the nation federally designated as both a historic Black university and a Hispanic serving institution. Dr. Brownlee is adjunct professor at Morgan State University and the University of Charleston, where he teaches business management, human resources, social justice, and community college leadership. Dr. Brownlee is also a higher education columnist for EdSurge. In other words, he is a prolific thought leader. So congratulations to Dr. Mordecai Ian Brownlee. And our topic for today is the future of the community college success agenda. We have 4 major topics that we will cover today: understanding the purpose of college, the landscape of higher education, innovating the learning experience, and changes on the horizon. And Dr. Brownlee is here. There he is. There he is, the man.
How are you, good sir? Good evening. Good evening.
What's up, my friend?
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Dr. Johnson. Now, I've been looking forward to connecting with you and glad to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you here because you are the man without question. If you can't do it, nobody can. So tell us about yourself. How'd you get here?
Well, you know, it's been an amazing journey that I'm blessed to make it out on the other end, right? And now moving into a community college presidency at the Community College of Aurora, and just absolutely excited. But, you know, I am a student that raised by a single mother, tested at developmental levels, failed developmental math, really questioned whether or not education was for me, and was just blessed to have some folks, in addition to my mother, to just speak life and opportunity and success into me. And taking on some work study jobs at the community college was the transformation for me, and some folks that decided to be my mentor and really look out for me, and the light bulb went off. When I realized that you can make a living helping others, help that light bulb go off for them in their lives and changing the trajectory of their lives and their families' lives and social and economic mobility, I said, this is something that I want to dedicate my life to. And that's the journey that I've been on, and it's brought me to this point.
So I think I can safely say you are a social justice warrior or advocate.
Oh yeah, advocate for sure.
All right. So you teach, you write, you have your own website, and you're going to be president of a community college. When do you sleep?
My wife would tell you never. My children will tell you when they run into the room, in between running into the room in the middle of the night, right? And so, you know, I've learned to do the best that I can with what I'm given. But here's the thing I tell you, Dr. Johnson, and it's something that has always resonated with me that I've been on this journey. When you're blessed to be able to do this work of being an educator, that means that you're going to make some certain sacrifices. Certainly, we have to keep our health and wellness at the top of our forefront mind so we can do this work. But the reality is there are some folks that work harder all their lives and they never see the fruits of their labor. Mm-hmm. And as educators, we have an opportunity on a pretty quick spectrum to see the impact of our work. And we're able to sow seeds to where we're typically able to see the growth begin. We may not see the full blossom, but we'll be able to see some aspects of it. And so if it means that I'm going to have some long nights, some long days, I'm all about that work because as my current president, Dr. Adina Williams Lawson, always says, President of St. Philip's College, we're doing God's work being educators. And so that's going to mean we're going to put in some time, but I'm committed to doing it.
I think one of the, well, perhaps the most rewarding thing about being an educator is when a student comes to you 5, 10, 15 years later and say, hey, Dr. Johnson, hey, Dr. Brownlee, this is what I'm doing now. Thank you for your help.
That's it. Amazing, right? You played a part in the spectrum. And man, I'm telling you, it's so fulfilling. There's no better job, in my opinion. There really is no better job.
You know, when I was a high school student, you know, you take those aptitude tests to see what you could or should be. Mine said I would be either a preacher or a teacher. And I said, well, it's the same. You just have a different subject.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I'll tell you, sometimes as an educator, you're asking when is offering time going to happen because we need to buy more resources and things for students. So know, that offering may look more like state legislature and some donors, but either way, we'll get the job done.
Good, good. Well, our topic tonight is the future of the community college success agenda. So, you know, I have lots of questions and I like to dig into these words and pick out exactly what you mean. So what is the success agenda? What does that mean?
So the success agenda, you know, as we look at the history of community colleges in this country, right? It's always interesting when I have conversations with individuals that talk about, well, equity and inclusion has always been a part of higher education. Actually, it hasn't. You know, when you look at the foundation of higher education, it was not for all. It was not about equity, diversity, and inclusion. But community colleges, based on their foundation, as we look at that legislation that took place on a national scale and its impact, was to create that opportunity for access. Now we're at a point in time to where access is not enough. You know, it's not just about can you have access to the academy? Can you have access to opportunity? Now it's about putting systems in place to ensure that it is equitable. There's equality, there's diversity, there's inclusion. We're creating spaces where all are being honored and welcomed, and that we're putting systems in place to ensure equitable achievement. And that in itself is the future of the community college success agenda. Realizing that it's not just about access. It is about all other factors that ensure success of the individual and the student.
So what's the definition of success?
Success, you know, it comes down to the envisioning, right? That envisioning of completion. And that completion can look like completing the journey in regards to transferability, right? That's been a large part of the student success agenda at community colleges for years. It's just transferability, making sure that they are making it to the four-year institution. However, more and more and more, as we talk about workforce development and advancements, we're talking about certificate completion. We're talking about short-term credentialing. We're talking about just, you know, more than just the associate degree completion that many folks have known community college to be. So that success in itself is determined by the student. But I think from an infrastructure standpoint, and as we talk about the budgeting and the responsibility that we have back to taxpayers, it is ensuring that we are doing our part to prepare the workforce of today and tomorrow.
Well, that leads directly into our next topic, and I have a lot of questions regarding that as well. Understanding the purpose of college. What is the purpose of college?
You know, I've been asked this question in the classroom. I've had students say, tell me what is the purpose of college? And I'll tell you my personal belief, and I've yet to experience anything that's shaken me from this thought. The purpose of college is to begin to not only enlighten, but it's where the student discovers their truth. What I mean by that is up until the point of the classroom, especially when we're talking about first time in college students, they were raised by a parent, a guardian. They have had experiences and exposures to those that they love and care for. And those exposures represent ideology. And that ideology becomes their reality and their ideology. So your political beliefs, your views on economics, your views on religion, your views on society, all these things are shaped by realities that have essentially been inputs in your life. It's not typically until you're off to college, if you will, that could be off to college down the street, but in new learning environments where now you are being faced in what I call a new spectrum of society, where you are now battling, if you will, different ideologies, and you're being exposed to curriculum that will cause you to reflect and think on your current ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you begin to ask yourself, is this true? What I have been taught, is it true? Does it truly exist? Is it real? Or is this something that I have been indoctrinated with? And I think that that's a beautiful, beautiful world that we're able to create within the academy. And we have a great responsibility as we look towards creating productive citizens to truly understand what this truth and reality that they decide to accept look like.
Well, Dr. Brownlee, you said a lot of trigger words, I'll call them. Trigger words, I'll call them. First, I'd like to add that I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I can attest that my college experience left an indelible mark on me all these years later. I would say that I am the man that my college taught me or encouraged me to be to this day. But one of the words you said was indoctrination. And give me your feelings about the term indoctrination or the act of indoctrination.
You know, it's very interesting. I will tell you this as a parent, right? My wife, who, by the way, Daphne, we met almost 20 years ago in community college, right? And so, of all places, right? And so, you know, I think about now us as parents and being on this journey, and you know, you have to be. There's some parents, there's some people who share information in a way that is meant to enlighten. It is meant to spark interest. It is meant to continue you along the journey of self-discovery. However, there are some who parent or guard in a way to where they are giving you bias, and they are feeding you prejudice, and they're feeding you bias, and they're feeding you bigotry, and they're feeding you limitation. And they may use various devices and vices to get you to believe, or to at least act as though you believe what it is that they have indoctrinated you with. But what happens in the midst of that, of years and years and years of that, is that you are being indoctrinated, the indoctrination. And so these become your realities, these become your beliefs. The danger in that is that that is then your perspective. That is the lens in which how you see the world. And so as you then enter into society and you are to then be a productive, collaborative citizen, some people are unable to shake themselves from these indoctrinations. And it all depends on what they have been indoctrinated with, right? If it's with the good and the positive of the world, then you're able to build upon that, and that becomes the foundation on which you grow and advance and then add back to society. However, you have people that spend 20, 30, 40, 50 years trying to figure out how to shake themselves of what they were told as a child. And it's always it's amazing to me as educators, as we go back and study the research of childhood education and childhood experiences, that we can recall where we are as 40 and 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds, what happened to us at the age of 8, right? It's just amazing how that works. It just speaks to just how important those formative years are. So it is so important as educators that as we are relaying this information, we're providing this information through the classroom, through curriculum, that we do the absolute best that we can to be ethical, responsible, and create environments where all have an opportunity to succeed, because the great world will wait on them, and it is to await them, and they are to figure out how to be great and advance within this world that may not want them to succeed.
Well, let's go back to the topic, understanding the purpose of college. Now, you have academic pathway, career pathway, productive citizenship. Now, if I may add, some of what you said sort of implied what I'll call critical thinking. And I would say that's part of being a productive citizen, or being productive as a citizen. So go back and tell us how all those pieces fit together: academic pathway, career pathway, and productive citizenship.
Absolutely. So we have a responsibility as educators to ensure that we are creating opportunities and infrastructure to place this student on their academic pathway. They're coming to us to learn, right? Self-explanatory in that regard. However, the other piece of that is ensuring that they're remaining on their pathway. Everyone is coming to us at different points in the journey. Some are prepared, some are not prepared. I probably fell in the not prepared group. Do we have the systems in place to ensure that they're able to discover themselves appropriately on the pathway? And then they're going to the point of discovery. Here comes the career pathway. So taking the classes, learning from the classes, learning in an environment that is continuing to feed and support and help them to understand their journeys. This is not to say that the journey won't change. However, have we created exposures like experiential learning and to be able to expand the mindset, because you have students, depending upon what level of the spectrum economically they're coming from, will mean that they may have limited to many exposures. And so we have to create a system for each of those individuals to succeed no matter where they are. That all in itself then helps produce productive citizenship. And I'll just add that a part of that is the importance of liberal arts education, right? Because even in the midst of community college, that it is important to have the liberal arts component, because that's where critical thinking takes place, right? And so we're not just trying to create robots and folks to comply. We're creating individuals that are productive and able to think.
Great. Well, let's go into the landscape of higher education. I have some other questions, but if we have time, I'll come back to them. But we have a lot of heavy topics to discuss here. So let's talk about the landscape of higher education. What's public trust?
Yes. Well, as we look at what has happened over the past 30, 40 years in higher education, there has been a impact, a chink in the armor of trust and how the public views higher education. And in a lot of facets, we have lost a lot of ground on trust with the public in terms of the belief that this credential, this degree, this award will help lead me towards a life of betterment, right? We watched the images 20 years ago, I think is when it really began to hit mainstream, of individuals having bachelor's and master's and doctorate degrees and could not land jobs. So what began to happen is you have individuals with an insurmountable amount of debt, student debt, and they cannot land the jobs of their dreams. And so years and years and years and years of this has essentially built about a distrust in higher education, the belief that I may get this credential, but it may lead me to nowhere. I think that within that, we found two things. Number one, it is absolutely criminal to create insurmountable amounts of debts on individuals who are just dreaming to care and do better for their families. I think number two part of that is that micro credentialing is very real. And as industry continues to embrace micro credentialing at higher levels, it puts community colleges in more competitive situations to be able to quickly dial up, work with industry, and create these credentials to be able to ensure that individuals within 3, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, maybe maybe 16 weeks, but are able now to go out and land opportunities and jobs for themselves, 40, 50, 60, 70, $80,000, and to be able to change the trajectory of their lives and their families' lives. And so from that, we will see a societal improvement, a lack of a less dependency on social service, and more improvements and infusion into social dollars that are being made available to advance communities.
So, Dr. Brownlee, would you say then that a purpose of education, or maybe even a focus of education, is the social and economic mobility?
Absolutely, right. And so as we look at the current pathways that have been proven through time, it just comes down to the refinement. Education is the pathway towards social and economic mobility. It is the catalyst towards the advancements in society and community as a whole. It's just the responsibility, especially those of us in community college space, to do a better job of being, and I will use strategically the word aggressive. We have to be more aggressive in what we do and how we do it to meet the needs and the demands of not only the students of yesterday, but the students of today and tomorrow.
And how was all of that affected by COVID-19?
The impact of COVID-19 is pretty, it's historic, right? So as we look at what has happened through the pandemic, it has proven many things. Two things that it has definitely proven is, one, community colleges as a whole have the ability to pivot. We can still offer services and to be able to do so remotely and virtually. And I think that if it wasn't for COVID-19, we would not have pivoted as quickly into this space as we have as a whole, as a sector. Secondly, now it comes to charge. As we are recovering from the pandemic at the various rates respectively, and please, by all means, go out and get vaccinated if you're watching this. But it's very important that we, as we recover, that we not return to the days of old, that we take what we've been able to prove throughout the pandemic, and now comes the charge to be able to continue to provide these virtual online services, and dare I say now around the clock, dare I say 24/7, dare I say 7 days a week, proving that we can get into the space and that there is a demand for the space. But now let's use this as the stepping stones to be able to provide more.
Well, would it be the responsibility of community colleges to help fill all those unfilled positions at the end of our pandemic?
I say yes, right? Who better prepared as we look at the academy as a whole and we compare ourselves as community college to the 4-year space? We have an ability. We just have to see it as our advantage, our competitive advantage, if you will, to be able to pivot quickly based on industry demands and needs. But what becomes part of the challenge for community colleges in comparison to our 4-year land grant institutions and others is when it comes down to economics, when it comes down to resources, and when it comes down to brand. It is very important to realize and always call out the stigma of community colleges, right? So as I think about my friend Dr. Steve, Steve Robinson and his work, right, and the stigma of community colleges, we have to call it out, because the reality is that as we, and I'm a proud product of community colleges, as we continue to tell the transformative story, the power behind community colleges, we can do more and better work to realize that it's not just about the big brand that you may go and pay for, whereas you may get a better return on investment by entrusting your local community college with your academic and career pathway. So as the more of us tell that story and we call it out for what it is, we can then do something and educate even more to our local communities to say, you know what, your child, you as an individual, you have value. Put trust in branding your local community college. You will get a better return on investment. And you may realize that you may have easier is not the word, a more strategic, more aligned, and less indebted track towards social and economic mobility.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of questions and comments regarding both those main topics we just discussed, but we better move on. So our next topic, innovating the learning experience.
So innovating the learning experience, what I would say is that, as we look at virtual and technology integrations into the classroom, right? I'm really big on this, as you know, and you stated I write for EdSurge. I'm really big in supporting the ed tech movement and being a part of that. I believe that as we look at workforce development, we've been so used to the in-lab, put your hands on something space, not realizing that what has happened in the industry is that industry is moving more and more and more towards computers, engagement, virtual spaces. What does it look like, what we've been used to putting our hands on and being in the space and putting on the goggles, of realizing there's actually a robot doing that work? However, have we properly trained you to tell that robot what to do? And so as industry is shifting, education is shifting, or should shift. So industry has been driving this conversation. Now it's time for us to ensure that we are a part in tandem with industry, and they see community colleges as partners and not a hindrance. As we talk about online and virtual experiences, is that, and we talked about this previously in the landscape of higher education, we have to ensure that we're creating a foothold in that space and that we have proper saturation within the market, that the market and the communities are seeing us as part of the solution, in which we are. And then the other part of that is credentialing, right? There's this movement that's been happening for quite some time. We've watched it happen out of San Francisco and these other pockets of saying essentially, look, you don't have to go to school for 4 years to be able to make 40, 50, 60, 70, $80,000.
Right, exactly.
What does it look like to be able to get the training you need in 10 weeks? Well, who better suited to be able to do this work than community colleges? However, we have to see ourselves as a major player in this space. And my fear in this all is that if we fail to embrace this as a sector, then there is someone who will embrace it for us. And if we're not careful, we will lose our footing in the market. And it's to a point where the advancements in technology are happening at such a rapid pace that we may not be able to recapture what we lose.
Well, I can't keep my mouth shut, so I'm gonna have to stick a few things in here. All right. So speaking of humans operating robots and using computers, would you say that you are competing with these pop-up coding organizations or schools or whatever they call themselves?
Absolutely, right. If this is a conversation that some folks may not want to go into, but if we look at what has happened previously, historically, got to go here. I'm sorry, Doctor. I got to go here. If we look at what happened in for-profit, these for-profit institutions, these predatory institutions, they really took a hold of a market that was really the responsibility of community colleges. However, community colleges as a sector, as a whole, were not willing to move at the pace and rapid pace and in the ways in which we should have moved. We failed to do that. And because of that, our students, our communities were hurt. And they're still trying to climb out of that amount of debt and damage that was done to them. So if anything, I'm one of the folks that is saying, listen, we can't let this happen again. We have an ethic, moral responsibility to our students to ensure this doesn't happen. But if we look at these marketing ploys, they were in low socioeconomic communities, many of the communities in which community colleges serve. So if we can then look at changing our messaging and our approach to student success, we can do more to care for and ensure that our communities are properly staffed, our workforce is properly educated, and that our communities are eradicating themselves of poverty because we have more credentialed individuals being able to do the work.
Yeah, I would say that community colleges overall are trusted sources in our communities as opposed to for-profit. I don't even want to call them colleges.
Predatory institutions, right?
Predatory institutions, right. Okay, let's get to our last topic. Changes on the horizon.
Yes, so as we look at the conversations that are happening now in this space, it is so important that our state legislature, our local elected officials truly see us as partners, right? And so I can't wait to get to Aurora, Colorado, and just be able to have those conversations with our elected officials and all of those that are vested as stakeholders, because part of this work, we have to figure out to ensure that the academy is able to remain whole. What do I mean by that? Well, as we talk about, if workforce development is important to a particular community, this is nationwide I'm talking now, okay?
Right.
If it's important to a particular community, we have to ensure that that institution is being funded properly to be able to do the work, okay? And so as we look at these funding models, we have to ensure that the work of the community college is being incentivized. As we look at developmental education, if we're saying that only community colleges, you're able to do this work and you're able to do this work best and you've been doing this work historically, then properly fund me to be able to do this work. If you're saying workforce development is what we need, then properly fund me to be able to do this work. If dual credit, concurrent enrollment is important to the community, ensure that I am properly funded to be able to do this work. I, the college, should not be losing dollars or cents on dollars to be able to provide a service that is truly a public good. We have to ensure that the public sees that it is good. And that's all a part of that college funding model. And the public, go for it.
I'm with you 100%. But at which level should the funding source be? Should it be at the community level? Should it be at a city level? Or should it be at a state level or even a federal level?
I'm going to say all the above. You know, what I think it really comes down to is preference. But my request is ensure that it happens, right? So the preference is to the community to see in the ways in which it wants to govern and support itself, right? Whether that includes local taxation or state taxation. I'm all for it. If it includes, public infusion in terms of state infusion of dollars, along with tuition and fees, along with soft funds, and to be able to identify grants, I'm all for it. However the community sees itself to fund itself, so be it. However, here comes that other part of the conversation is that let's be honest in ensuring that we're having the proper conversations and making the proper decisions to ensure that if we have gaps, that we're funding those gaps. If we have opportunities, we're funding those opportunities. This is not to say that we're doing on the backs of our communities. However, there's another side of that coin. If we don't do it with our community, who is going to do it with us? And so it's to say that I'm not just saying raise taxes. I'm not saying, raise more funds to be able to do this on the backs of the community. However, it is the community's responsibility in itself to be able to educate and support itself. Yeah. And so if we can find that level of sustainability and vitality, amazing things can happen in that space. However the community sees fit, but let's make sure that it happens.
Okay, Dr. Brownlee, what would be your takeaway that you would like people to have?
Community colleges have been a fabric in this country. We're here to stay. There's a whole group of us that are educators in this space that want to see the good work happen. Join us in doing this good work. Help educate your fellow children in your communities to understand the power of community colleges and the value that we add to society. And some great things can happen in partnership with our industry partners. And community colleges are committed to doing that work.
Sir, thank you for your great brain, your great comments, and that great takeaway with a call to action included. Dr. Mordecai Ian Brownlee is Vice President for Student Success at St. Philip's College here in San Antonio, Texas, and he is the next president of the Community College of Aurora, Colorado. Congratulations, sir, on your appointment as president or your selection as president. I'm David Johnson. I'm the host of our Educational Innovation 360 Degrees, which is sponsored by Cassandra Williams, the CEO of Educational Innovations 360. And it's been a pleasure having you here as a guest. And I'd like to say good night and good well to all of our guests and audience. Good night, sir.
Good night, sir.